Good morning, YouTube. Today we've got something pretty cool for you. We're going to go over 5 generations of Ferrari engine bays.
So are you recording all of the nefarious activities?
If you're new to the channel, my name is Dan, and this is our dealership, MG Supercars, and I've got Ferraris all the way from the 355 up to the 488, and we're going to go through each of their engine bays so you can see the differences, and let me know in the comments below which one is your favorite. All right, let's start off with the oldest to the newest. The 355 is first. All right, YouTube, check it out. We've got a Ferrari 355. Now, admittedly, this one is modified. We've got the Group M intake. So normally you've got this big black air box right here, and the side panels are off. So normally there is like a little metal side panel right here. It doesn't go all the way. It's just kind of like a half panel. It's purely cosmetic, but you've got, as you've noticed, black intake manifolds. So they weren't doing the red stuff back then, although it does have some red on the valve covers. But you can see you've got the oil filter right here in the valley, pretty easy to access. You've got your exhaust right coming along there, and then back right here underneath the rear section below the Group M intake. You've got your accumulator and F1 pump over there. So it's interesting is they actually switched them around in later years. You've got your F1 fluid right here, power steering up there, oil tank on the side. So, you know, these are all dry sump, and it actually has the sump to the right-hand side of the engine. What's fascinating is this is a very compact engine bay. If you notice from the front of the engine to back here, and this is the back of the transmission. It's literally right there. Right there's the pumpkin. So that is your clutch and flywheel. So it's a totally different design. You've got fuel filters over there, fuel lines up in the front, the fuel tank is across the front, and that is part of the reason you cannot access the timing belts in the 355 and why you have to drop the engine is because the fuel tank is right there squished between the cabin and the engine. So the transaxle in this car is actually mounted this way. So the gears in it are all longitudinal, and then you have a shaft running from the engine back down here to the clutch and flywheel, then back to the transmission, where it then changes the direction of the shaft to be 90 degrees, and then you've got your drive shafts going out right there on the sides. You can see drive shaft cover right there, and it's a little bit harder to see this one, drive shaft cover right there. Now obviously if you don't have the F1 system, this won't be there, that won't be there, and you won't have the mechanical or the hydraulic system on the side of the gearbox down there. This one obviously is a very different design from the more modern stuff, as you'll see in a minute, but you also have where you still have spark plug wires. You don't have coil on plug. A little bit older technology. This one happens to have the Challenge grill, which looks amazing. And, well, let's be real, this is probably the best sounding of all of them, so, you know, there is that. All right, next up we have the 360, which is made from 1999 all the way until 2005. So believe it or not, yes, they did make a few of these in 2005. They were all Spiders, and I want to say there was only like a couple hundred of them in 2005. So it had an overlap year with the 355, and it had an overlap year with the 430, which we'll get to in a minute. Now you can see much longer engine bay, and that is because the transmission is mounted in line with the engine. So the engine output shaft goes directly into a clutch and flywheel, which goes directly into the transmission, which is actually a transaxle, and then you've got the drive shafts coming out in the front half of the engine. So your differential is actually in the front, and all the gearbox is in the rear. So it's kind of flip-flopped a little bit. So you go straight in, got the differential, then the transmission. So it'd come back to transmission, then go back up to the differential. Got your exhaust running on the sides, coming back here to the cats and into. This is an aftermarket Tubi exhaust. So normally there's two different exhausts. You've got the factory sport exhaust and the regular factory exhaust. The regular one is massive. It's this huge box-looking thing. It takes up this entire space. It's actually quite large, but this one sounds much better. Got secondary air pump right there. Normally, if this was an F1 car, you would see an F1 pump and accumulator and all that stuff right here, and then the hydraulic lines would go out and over to the shift box, which is right there. But that is, of course, a converted car, and it has a mechanical shift box right there. Coolant overflow tank, air boxes. Now, here's where it gets also different. You have your oil tank right here, so this is your dry sump. And this is what's called the disserator, so it actually is where the oil can froth up. What's really fascinating is the oil sump is actually integrated into the top of the transmission. So when you pour the oil in, it's actually going into the transmission. There is an oil feed tube, which I can't see, unfortunately, but it's way down there, and it actually runs to the bottom of the engines. The 360 engine, believe it or not, is effectively the same engine as the 355, just a little bit larger, 3.6 liters instead of 3.5. It's got obviously totally modern intake manifold with you got these cross ports and a balancer in the middle. You've got 2 throttle bodies right here, and as you can see now, Ferrari did the red intake covers, but interesting enough, on the 360, the valve covers are actually gray from the factory, not red. You got your power steering up there, and on the 360 you've got these big oil cooler lines that run to an oil cooler over there. The coupes have totally different engine bays than the Spiders, so you'll notice they have these composite panels. On the Spiders, it actually has these wee little metal panels, and you don't have as much paneling up in the front. It's a little bit different, so it's a kind of a strange design. These switch to coil on plug, so you can see right there is your ignition coil right there, so it makes it a little bit more modern. These are a little bit simpler to work out. Now the fuel tanks, you can see that silver panel, that is actually heat shield and heat shield right there. So the fuel tank is actually split into 2 with a balancing tube, and that's how they get access, where they have a panel and you can pop out that panel and get to the front of the engine, because you remember the 360 still do need timing belt services. Now moving on to the 430, these were made from 2005 till 2009, and again, another evolution, but effectively the same basic layout of the engine, but a completely different engine. So this is the F136 engine. It is timing chain driven, no timing belts, none of that stuff. It is a much more modern engine. It's a completely new designed engine, which they actually run in a lot of different cars. It's in quite a few generations of Ferraris and actually Maseratis, and they've used it in a lot of stuff, but wonderful engine. Again, it still has the same basic layout: engine, differential, transmission. So you got the transaxle right here, clutch right here. Remember, all of these have a clutch, whether or not it's an F1 or a manual. So this one, or it does have the F1 system right here behind this panel. You're gonna have your pump accumulator, and the hoses for all that are gonna go down here. One substantial difference is that they added the electronic differential, the E-diff, in the F430. So that differential actually has its own hydraulic lines that get powered by the computer. It tells it whether or not to give it more or less grip on the left or right wheel, or whether or not to lock the differential or not. On the 360, I forgot to mention that the engine on this one, they started adding variators. So they actually have variable valve timing, but it is only on, I believe, the exhaust cams, not on the intakes. So the 355 did not have that at all. And when you get to the 430, it has variators on both the intake and exhaust cams. So the variator's right there. That's that plug that's going right into the valve cover. Of course, the valve covers now are back to red, as is the intake manifold. You have these long runners on the intake manifold on the 430, and you've got a balancing port in the center that actually, this piece right here is actually a valve that can twist and balance between the 2 halves of the engine. Got modern 2 throttle bodies, or power steering reservoir right there. Again, disterator, same thing. You've got all the engine oil going into the top of the transmission. That's where it is kept. Coolant overflow air box is pretty much the same as the 360, and basically the same muffler, although they changed it out and they have different ones for the sport mufflers. Now, on the 430s, if you got one of the sport exhaust systems, it actually had no muffler right here, and it had mufflers that were there, and it kind of just split off and went to the sides. Now, I'm not a big fan of that particular exhaust. I don't think it sounds as good as this exhaust, or better yet, an X-pipe. But as you see, this one has some carbon fiber panels. These are not from the factory, but you could get optional carbon fiber panels from the factory on these. The 360, I don't believe, came with carbon fiber panels as an option at all. Same with the 355. But of course, you can buy aftermarket stuff and do whatever you want. All right, now we get to a pretty big jump up in technology, but again, this is still an F136 engine, so it's the same engine block as the 430, but totally different heads, totally different intake, obviously. And the big difference is now you have direct injection. So that black thing right there, that circular black thing, is the high pressure fuel pump, and that pump manages the direct injection. So that gave this engine a substantial boost, almost 100 horsepower more than the 430, which is interesting because the 430 has almost 100 horsepower more than the 360, but the 360 does not have that much more horsepower than the 355. It's not that big of an increase in power. You've got a completely different disc radiator, although it still has where the oil goes down. Actually, this one I don't believe is integrated into the transmission, because now you have this massive DCT transmission. So this transmission is huge. Takes up this whole area right here. So it's all one big integrated DCT transmission and differential. You've got where they switch to oil filter cartridges. And of course we still have variable valve timing and red heads on this. So red intake manifold, red heads is still looking all good. You've got your coolant overflow on the right hand side, and you have your power steering way in the back here. So they've kind of moved around a few things. Also optional, carbon fiber engine bay panels, carbon fiber intake box. You have a different intake box. It's at the very, very back of the car. Something that's worthy to note, on the 458s, the intake actually comes all the way from up here, and it flows back in a tube to the intake right there. On the 430s, you have these big air scoops, and runs them into, you can see where it's connected right there. On the 360, you'll notice there's no tube on this side. So that side does not bring in air for the engine. It's only on the left side. So it sucks in air here and only right there. Now on the 355, completely different. You've got, again, tubes going both left and right, and you got air scoops right up there. So it's kind of more like the 458 where it's right at the windows. All right, and finally, the most modern of these, the Ferrari 488, made after the 458. All right, so this one, obviously, we're missing a few parts because we're in the middle of working on this car. But we've got carbon fiber engine panels. These are from the factory. Now, if you notice, the intake is substantially different, and that is because, well, we have, of course, a turbo car. It's kind of fascinating the way it works is you got the intake box here. So there's where your intake is, right there and right there. It comes to the box. The box goes in that way, goes into the turbos. Turbos send it through some intercoolers, which then send the compressed air into the front of the intake manifold and then kind of ram it backwards. Now, this engine is a different engine from these. They actually modified it again. You can see you've got the high pressure fuel pumps because, again, we have direct injection. And of course, it is a cluster over there because you have all the turbos and all the exhaust and all that stuff coming out the side of the heads and then cramming it into the turbos and the intercoolers and all that stuff. So it is a tight squeeze back there, although it gets to be a little bit more spacious right here. Got the same basic oil reservoir right here. Got your coolant up there instead of onto the side. And right here is your power steering, kind of tucked away. So a lot more stuff going on, a lot more stuff crammed into the same amount of space, basically, because you notice it's not really that much bigger of an engine bay than the 458, although it's maybe a tiny bit bigger. Interesting enough is that the chassis is basically the same. So the platform stayed about the same size, you know, so it's got different chassis, then those two are kind of the same chassis, and then these two are kind of the same chassis. But you've got, those two have kind of the same engine, these two have kind of a similar engine, and then now a completely different engine. And obviously this shares the engine with basically the F8 is effectively the same engine as this, just with some small modifications. Got red heads still, and that is actually just a cover on part of the intake manifold. So this piece right here is just like a grate. It's actually, you can kind of see the intake is down there on the sides. Interesting evolution of the engines and engine bays on these cars. I feel like we need to at least, well, we can't start that one, but we could at least start these ones and have you hear them. I think we need to do that. Sorry guys, it's not running at the moment, but it will be shortly. This is going in there. If we get this done today, we'll throw it in the video. My apologies. All right, YouTube, there you have it. 5 generations of V8 Ferraris. Which one has the best engine bay and which one has the best sound? Put it in the comments below. We want to hear your thoughts And let us know, what else do you want to see from us? We'd love to do this sort of stuff, although admittedly it's kind of rare that we have something as cool as 5 generations of Ferraris, and that's why we're going to take this opportunity to really give you this comparison. But let us know in the comments below, which one do you want? All right, guys, that's it for this video. You are so awesome. Thank you so much for watching. We're going to be doing a lot of cool car stuff, so like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you in the next one. It's going to be sweet.